answer more questions and do some stuff with all of you. So we started working on something like this to kind of see what it would look like. Now, we're also streaming this on Facebook Live. We're also streaming this on YouTube. So I'm going to bounce back and forth through all of these just to be able to see all of you and make sure that I'm catching any questions that you may have from here. So we're not going to do this for too long. We're probably just going to knock this out for about a half hour, and we can spend any questions that we can do here. So I'm going to go ahead and just go take a look and see if we have any immediate questions from anybody so far. And then if we don't, I'll go ahead and there's a couple of other things that I would want to just kind of share as well. So let's see, I'm going to come over here. Welcome to everybody. I'll go ahead and I'll just start. One of the first things that we got, right, the last time that we were here is we were talking about the movement of pictures, right? So this was something that people wanted to know immediately right off the bat, right? The question was, what happens when an image is moved from one location and it can't be found, right? So I wanted to make sure that we spent some time dedicated to doing that so that we can work with this, right? Take a look. I have a folder right here in this one area called Other Stuff. Let me show you this. Right here, I have a folder called Other Stuff, and if I double click on that folder, there's nothing in it. Now, here are all the images that I have inside of the catalog. Right? And what I did was I dragged them into the Other Stuff folder. More often than not, it is not a good idea for you to move your images from when they're inside of Lightroom. Like, that's going to cause a little bit of a problem when we're working with that. So by and large, just keep everything inside of Lightroom, keep everything inside of one location, but you may have to every now and again. Now, when we do this, what will happen is we're going to get an error message, right? So if we look right now, I double click on this, and if I were to switch to the develop module, it's going to tell me file could not be found. The downside to this is that once you can't find the file, it also can't do any kind of development work inside of it. So you'll notice that if you go over here inside of the develop module, you don't have access to any of the sliders. So what we did the last time was we said, let's take this in 2 steps, right? If you want to find these pictures, what we want to do here is we want to just right click right in this section, and there's an area here that says go to folder and library. I almost always recommend to people select go to folder and library, and from inside of here, you'll see that the images are missing here on the lower left-hand corner, right? So if I were to take a look in this area, it shows BQ images and it shows that there's a question mark. So what I want to do here is I want to right click on this and I'm going to select find missing folder. I'm going to select that. Once I do that, then I can go wherever that folder is. So in this case, I have it under other stuff. There's my BQ images because I moved it outside of Lightroom. I'm going to select on choose, and now that should be okay, right? There are instances where Lightroom will not be able to read that. You might have to restart and then bring yourself back up here. So once I restart this program, we should be able to see all of the images back up. So where is this important, right? This will be important when you're working, if you're trying to move stuff from, let's say, one hard drive to another hard drive, because you've run out of space on one drive, you can go ahead and do it that way, and that'll make it a lot easier. Right? So inside of here, if we're back, notice that now inside of the develop module, it found the file. Over here on the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that it says original photo. So that's pretty good. We have all of the stuff that sits right here. Makes it very easy. So I wanted to make sure before we did anything else that we just covered that. Now I'm just going to go ahead and bounce to a couple of different questions here, and we'll go ahead and we'll move over here. Okay, Andres Roy. Now, if you want to send any messages, right? If you want me to take a look at any files, I would say you can just go ahead and do that at rc@aboutrc.com. Let's go ahead and just, you can send me the messages from there. So just go to rc@aboutrc.com, send me an email with whatever image you want me to take a look at, and I'll be more than happy to take a look at that for you. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of other images inside of here. I want to start working on, let's say that I want to work on this image here. All right, so I have this image here set up, and what I want to do from here is I want to be able to do some changes to this image. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over here inside of the develop module. We talked about this the last time. With the develop module, a lot of the times when I'm using either localized brushes or if I'm using my radial brushes, more often than not, what I tend to do is I just grab these things and then just over juice it somewhere. From here, that gives me the ability to be able to kind of just take something and make it bigger and smaller. Do something like that, pull that all out. And then once I have that set, then I would probably bring back down my exposure by either double clicking it or dragging it. And then from there, just kind of increasing the shadows that I would have in that one area. So now I can see all of the information that sits inside of the moon bear. Keep in mind that when you're doing all of this kind of stuff, the thing that I'm worried about the most when I'm working with this has everything to do with these sections right here. If I were to show you, let's see, let's go over here. Right? If I take a look at this, that area right there tells me that there are areas that are clipping. And what is clipping? So clipping is that this area is so dark that we don't have any information that is going to print, right? Like if you were to take this and you would actually set it to print, it would actually look, it'd be like mud. There's no detail in that one area. On the opposite side, right, if something is clipped on the highlights, what happens is that that information is so bright that you're not going to get any data, right? Ink won't hit pages. There's no detail in that one area. So more often than not, when I'm looking at pictures, what I'm trying to do before I do anything else is I'm making sure that in these instances, I don't have any areas that are like this. If you hover over them and you move them back out, I want to make sure that there's information in that area. So to make this a little bit better for myself, what I would probably do here is I would just click on this, and having that set, that will keep all of this information open. Right? So now I don't have to hover over it back and forth, and now I can make some judgments. Right? I can come over here and grab my shadows and pull my shadows up, or if I need to pull blacks up, I could pull blacks up this way, or if I need to change an exposure, I can change exposure that way, but this allows me the ability to see that. The good part about this is that you could also do this with your adjustment brushes. So inside of here, I could paint in some areas, and notice that now by doing that, I could start pulling some of that information out, and I would do this as I need it. But the entire time, I'm just watching this overlay here. I'm making sure that that overlay doesn't blow out everything into black. So keep that in mind when you're working with your pictures. Now, another thing that I wanted to be able to do here, other things that we didn't really talk about inside of the last session that I thought would be really cool for us to talk about here is how to be able to use presets, right? There's a whole bunch of different types of presets that are available to you inside of Lightroom that a lot of people don't necessarily use, which I think is kind of weird. It's one of those things where they built them and they're kind of a little hidden, so you don't really necessarily see them. However, at the same time, you see people going out and buying different things like LUTs or buying these color adjustments that you can use to be able to retune your images. But there's a lot of that stuff that's actually built into Lightroom. Let me show you where it is. So inside of here, what I want to be able to do is I want to go into one of these images. So let's say, for example, I want to be able to take a look at this one. Now, when I double click on this one, it's going to show me a picture of a person in a kitchen. Now, I'm going to go over here to the develop module, and inside of the develop module, let's just make some quick changes. I'm going to grab this, I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to take the highlights and I'm going to bring that down just so that I make sure that I have all of the information that I need. So now that I have that set, Inside of here, there's color and black and white. And the area that I want to focus on for this office hour is this area here called color. So what this does is it gives us different ways of reimagining a specific color. It's not an adjustment that you make inside of here. The best way to think about it is almost kind of like you have a new baseline. So that baseline will then be your starting point, and then from there you would go ahead and you would adjust a couple of the different things. So from here, you click on Adobe Color, and there's Landscape, Portrait, Standard, and Vivid. So these color profiles are approximate profiles based on, let's say, camera types. Now, there's monochrome. If you click on monochrome, it just turns everything into black and white, and notice that it moves you over here in this one area into black and white. Now, I'm going to switch back to color. I'm going to show you some more stuff here. From inside of here, we can go ahead and we can just select Adobe Color from this list, and I'm going to select Browse. And what Browse does is it opens up this area called a profile browser. So in here, you have this color, and then you have favorites, and then you have the general Adobe Raw colors that we just saw. But more importantly is inside of here, there's a section called camera matching. And what camera matching does is it tries to do an approximation of different settings that you would have inside of your camera. So why is it important? So a lot of the times when I'm trying to make pictures, I'm shooting, if I want to be able to get a specific look to it, I dial the look into the camera. But at the same time, I'm going to want to shoot raw, right? So I like the look that I see on the back of the LCD, but when I bring the raw file inside of the computer, it doesn't necessarily keep it, right? What it'll do is it'll turn around and you'll look at it for like a second, and then it switches. And when it switches back to the original color. So I don't get that profile inside that raw file. So what you could do instead is go inside of here, right? Inside of Lightroom, and anytime you shoot a camera, so let's just say Fuji's for Fuji's, Canons for Canons, Nikons for Nikons, you'll see the settings for the specific camera. So right now, this was shot with a Fuji, right? If we come back over here and we take a look, right there, it says that it was a Fuji X-T3. Because of that, when we go inside of the Develop module and I go inside of Browse, for the camera matching section, you see only the profiles that you would see for a Fuji. Now, notice that as I hover over them, it shows me there's an Eterna setting, there's a Pro Neg setting, there's the Provia, right? Super juicy, if you want to be able to go to a Velvia. And sometimes it's just as simple as just making one adjustment change right here, and all of that is taken care of for you. So I'm a big fan of just trying to use all of the stuff that sits caked inside of this program, because I mean, that's going to be good for you, right? I'd rather use the stuff that's inside rather than buying a lot or buying profiles or doing any of that kind of stuff. You do it yourself. Now, where else is this important, right? A lot of the times when I'm shooting black and white stuff, there's something to be said about actually seeing in black and white. So I'll take my cameras and usually just set the settings into monochrome or set them to a specific type of monochrome. Let's say on the Fuji X-T3, they have all these different black and white versions. So I think it's a lot easier for me to be able to make exposure adjustments for what I want to be able to do when I can actually see in black and white. So I like being able to have that, but when it imports inside of here, it's going to strip all of that information out. This is where it could be good, because then now it's just a question of coming back over here, finding this specific profile that you had, and once you have that set, you're pretty much good to go. That's something that I think is pretty good when we're working with this. Now, one of the questions that came in here is, let's see, where is Lightroom Classic better than Photoshop and vice versa? Right. A lot of the times, a lot of the work that you would do inside of Lightroom has to deal with anything that has to do with localized corrections, general corrections. But it's kind of one of those things where it's like it's doing more and more and more digital darkroom stuff, right? Now that you have an adjustment brush and you can make these localized changes, it's actually pretty good. However, you don't have the option to be able to do layers. Like you don't have the option to be able to take one element and lay it on top of another and then move that element around, something that was probably pretty typical for something like cloning and healing, right, or compositing. That's something that's going to live strictly within the realm of Photoshop. I used to have to go into Photoshop a lot more for spot removals and healing, but it's actually gotten a lot better for this. So if I come over here and I showed this in our regular session, right, if I come back over to, it was this panoramic. Right, if I were to take a look at this panoramic instead of the develop module, let's see, there is a section here. See, so there's a piece of a wire, right? If I were to go to the spot removal tool, that's this one area right here. I get rid of that, and there's the spot that we were working on. Up until, I want to say 2 versions of Lightroom, I just didn't trust it. I didn't think that it did a very good job. So in instances like this, earlier you would have to do this. You would have to click on a spot and then kind of like make a caterpillar, right? Click on a spot, click on a spot, click on a spot, click on a spot. Now you don't have to do that, right? Newer versions of Lightroom, I'm just single clicking on those and deleting them. Right? Single versions of Lightroom, this newer version of Lightroom allows you to be able to drag an area and you can pull an area out, and you can sample one-to-one where you're just kind of like patching an area using your clone section, or you can use healing that does a little bit of a blending. It's gotten better for faces. It's gotten better for faces. It's gotten better for dust removal. It's gotten better for spots. So I tend to like that quite a bit. One of the other things that I think that people had to rely on Photoshop for was to work on faces, right? Like frequency separation stuff. A lot of the times there's like this big black magic stuff where you put all these different layers on top of one another to try to treat the face, sharpen details, but soften areas. Now you have all of that stuff inside of texture, which I think is something that you should take a look at. But any kind of compositing work you would have to do inside of Photoshop, any application of text you would have to do inside of Photoshop, moving whole areas into other areas and then blending them, that would be something that you should do inside of Photoshop as well. So let's see, let's take a look at another question here. As you recall, I asked a question about how to find a file that was moved. More importantly, how do you move images when you are in Lightroom? I've had terrible trouble doing this. So let's go ahead and just show you that real quick. All right. And I'm going to go inside of here, and inside of this one area, a lot of the way that you would move images inside of here would be inside of your folders area. You'll notice that right here inside of folders, you can right click, and from inside of here, you can move a photo to a folder. You could create a folder inside of this, right? So if I wanted to make a folder, you could right click right inside of here and make a folder called, new images, right? Once you click on this, it creates the folder, but then it also writes information into that. Now, if I wanted to come over here and grab a picture, let's say I'm going to grab a picture of my mom, I can drag it right from here inside of here. It's going to cause the file on the disk to be moved. You click on move, and this is the way that you would move it. Now, I will ask, right, one of my counters for most of that stuff is, I'd be very curious as to why you're moving folders from one spot to another. Right? Is it more of an organizational thing? Is it that things were messed up and now you're trying to be able to fix them? By and large, I'm in the process of trying to put together an idea for another book, but it sits a little bit outside of the conversations of this, but I'll talk about it anyway. I think that folders are not a very good, solid way of organizing yourself inside of Lightroom. I tend to look at folders as just areas that hold stuff, right? So a lot of the times with my folders, what I do is I just put 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit date. I'm evolving. I'm getting into that workflow now. And then all of the stuff just goes inside there, right? Any organizational stuff that I would do for Lightroom, I would actually do inside of collections and collection sets, which I think are amazing. So if you don't understand the concept of collections and collection sets, I would spend the time taking a look at that, because it really makes the use of Lightroom that you have super powerful, right? I always tell people, like, Lightroom is a program that does more asset management that happens to do some developing of pictures, right? More often than not, what I'm doing inside of Lightroom is I'm taking a look at all of my pictures and organizing them, right? And I'm not doing a lot of Photoshop work unless I have to absolutely work on something there. So Lightroom is a program where I see things, I kind of just make some basic adjustments from inside of there, and then I just print. But it's kind of just organizing most of the stuff that I have there. So hope that helps, Seth. If you want to have more information, then definitely just at me and we can work on that. Now, let's see. So let me see what's another one here. Okay, so Graham, Webb, what's the difference between and how clarity and texture work? How are they different? Let's go ahead and actually just explore that and take a look at that. I'm going to come over here, and she is going to hate me, but I'm going to use a picture of my mom who's making tamales, right? So if we were to take a look at a picture of my mom here, actually, you know what? Let's not use my mom yet. I think I'm going to do that for the next webinar. Let's use this one. So this is Novice Sul. Oh no, let's not use that one. That one is actually soft. It's for another demo. Okay, let's go back to my mom. That's fine. I'll use her. So clarity is basically, when we work with clarity, clarity is contrast that you would do for an image inside of your midtones, right? So a lot of the times when you're doing adjustments for shadows and you're doing adjustments for highlights, all of that information is pulled into the midtone. It's pulled from the midtone area, and the midtone area doesn't have a lot of zhuzh, right? A lot of effect for that. So when they created the clarity slider, the clarity was just kind of adding some contrast that sits in that one midtone area. Truthfully, I'm not a fan, right? But inside of here, what I would do is I would just grab this one picture and watch this. If I grab my clarity and I drag my clarity over to the right, it starts adding some kind of texturing to the picture, but it almost looks like it's posterized. Like, look right here in the spots where the spoons are, right? As you grab that clarity and you move that clarity over the right, it's like smushing pixel data, which I'm not a very big fan of. If you move it over to the left, it starts decreasing the contrast, right? Not good. So it was something that I did when I wanted to juice a whole bunch of different things, like, you know, stuff that had right, like brick walls or chrome or texture, crackly skin, right? I would put in sparingly, but I felt like it wasn't really something that I used a lot, because the more that I did it, the more it kind of gave it that fake effect. So I was like, I'm not going to do it. I would do all of my effects inside of Photoshop. That would be one reason that I would go to Photoshop, because in Photoshop, I would stack a couple layers. I would do an unsharp mask. I would then blend it, and then I would get the detail that I want. Something that was very similar to something like frequency separation, right? You would take edge detail and you would enhance edge detail, but then you would take skin detail and you would soften skin detail out. Now, that was cool. But then the engineers inside of Photoshop turned around and said, well, you know what? Why don't we work on that entire concept of edge detail and skin smoothing in just a slider? And that, at a 35,000 foot view, is what texture does. So the texture thing, if you move it towards the right, increases edge detail in a picture, increases sharpness in a picture. By doing that, it is almost kind of like a smarter way of doing clarity. So let's go back over here. Not that I would do this to my mom, but what I could do is I could just go over here to the texture section and notice that as I do that, I start getting more defined details in her face, right? I think her face looks beautiful. So I want to be able to, here, I'm going to actually go back here and I'm going to show you clarity one more time, right? Actually, you know what? Let's not even do it on her face. Let's do it right here on this spoon or fork. If I grab that, look at the detail in the wall and how the detail in the wall just kind of gets meh, right? I don't like that. Instead, I'm just going to juice this up a little bit so that you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to grab this, and what I'll do is I'll increase my texture. And notice that the texture still keeps the tonal quality of the image, which I think is really cool, right? But doesn't affect the contrast too much, right? So if I come over here, I feel like that changes the whole tonal quality of the image. Texture doesn't. So I'm a fan. I think that happens to be pretty cool. However, if we take a look at this one section here where we have the texture slider, you can also do inside of this, you can also do a couple of, oh, wait, hold up a second. Just went all over the place here. I'm going to set this over here. You can also do skin smoothing with this. So a negative amount of texture inside of here would allow me to be able to smooth skin out. Now, I don't think that she needs this, and I got to be honest with you, it is not something that I am inclined to do. I'm not, while I know retouching, I happen to think that there's a huge problem in our society when it comes to over retouching images and things like that. So I'm not a fan of that. But as a general example to explain what it is that we're doing, I'll go ahead and I'll show this, right? So inside of here, if I were to go to the develop module, I can come over here to the texture slider and now watch. As I move this to the left, notice that you still have the lines of details that you have inside of her face, but it starts smoothing out and softening the pixels, right? So if we look at that, that's where we were before, that's where we were after. Now, you have to keep in mind also that doing that softens the picture and it softens all of the details in the picture. So that may not be a good thing. Thankfully, one of the things that they did add to that is they added your ability to be able to do that using a brush. So if I were here, I can go ahead and I can just grab a brush and notice that inside of the brush section, I would grab the texture slider and I would move it to the left and to the right, and then paint in the area that I would want for there. So that would be the difference. Hope that helped you, Graham. Let's see here. Oh, Kathy, you just put one in here. I sometimes rename a folder for the name of the shoot, and then I shoot again for the same idea, and I have to move the new folders into the first folder, or the new photos into the first folder. I sometimes rename a folder for the name of the shoot, and then I shoot again for the same idea, and have to move the new folder, the new photos, into the first folder. I do keyword. Okay, so if you were doing it that way, then chances are, if you follow that logic, let's see here. I'm going to try to go off the reservation, like to just change something here. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to grab the BQ images. Right. Anytime that I use a set of images, I would put in a specific name and then a series number. So if I were to follow you, Kathy, from there, is I would say this would be the first shoot. So I would have BenQ RC 0054. All right. From here, what I would do if I were shooting this again is I would go back into Lightroom, and inside of Lightroom, you can do a right click right inside of here, and then you would import to this folder, select from there, that brings you into the import dialog box. And from here, you could put in a start number. So I'm a big fan of using file renaming templates in order for us to be able to work, right? So I'll go ahead and go inside of my file renaming template and create something. So right now I have it set for date, month, year, and there's the sequence number. But notice that inside of here, you still have the ability to be able to change the start number. So I would take a look at this. I would know that in the series, the last image that I have is 54. So if I were importing inside of here, I would have this start number be 55. And then that would allow you to be able to continue and keep the sequence of what you're working on. So rather than renaming folders or trying to use keywords to be able to do something else, just take a look at the last one that you have in your series, change the start number in your renaming template, and you should be fine. So hopefully that helps. Let's see here. So let's see. I'm gonna take a look inside of my YouTube section. Oh, it looks like the folks at Calibrate are, thank you very much. So I would be remiss if I did not mention the entire origin of this. So when we were talking about these kind of summer schools and office hours, one of the things that we wanted to do is I was just kind of like, I'm teaching and between semesters, I kind of wanted to just do something for fun. But I have friends at Calibrate, I have friends at BenQ, I have friends at Hanamule, and they were just like, listen, if you're going to be talking about stuff and you're going to be teaching some stuff, we can try to help out. So that's where kind of all of this stuff got set up. Like, for example, I have these two monitors, and probably one of the biggest questions that I get is like, what monitor am I going to use? Do I want to kind of just buy the first monitor that I see at Best Buy or do something else? And I'm just like, dude, you spend a lot of money on cameras and lenses and bags and things like that, but you spend all of your time kind of looking at the picture on these monitors, right? So the monitor is very, very important when you're working with that. This is where you see the image the most. You should take a look at this monitor. So that kind of started the relationship with BenQ. When I was looking at that, I was just like, look, I like it. Their color is faithful. I can reproduce. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Why don't I go ahead and actually invest rather than investing in the next lens? I'll rent the lenses and buy the monitor. But the monitor is only as good as you're keeping it in tune for whatever it is that you're working on. So inside of here, right, it never really goes too far. I keep a calibrator, right? So that's there. I profile the monitors. I work with the individual monitors because I want to be able to see the overall color of that. So I wanted to make a series that kind of explained some of that stuff, right? I wanted to talk about what kind of decisions do I do. Everything is going to be kind of based on printing. So I'm going to look at the pictures. I want to be able to look at them faithfully. What are the adjustments that I do and how do I make my adjustments inside of Lightroom? Then the second portion of that, and the thing that's what we're going to do next Tuesday, is I select one of the pictures that I really want. What kind of changes do I want to make to that picture in terms of color and tone and things like that, so that I could get ready to make a final print out of it. I can't make those changes if I don't know the colors that I'm actually working on, right? And if you've printed something on a cheap monitor and pulled a print out and we're like, I don't know, that's important, right? So I'm going to talk about a couple of different things that we can do for tonality and color adjustments inside of Photoshop to get it ready. And then the last part is I wanted to be able to just kind of walk you through that workflow. Like, how do I keep these things tuned? How do I work with ICC profiles? How do I download what I need for the specific paper that I need and then print? But if you've gone this far and you've seen all of this stuff, like I was like, that's what I want to do. I think it'd be kind of cool to just do it. And they were like, well, you know, we're happy to help. We're happy to support. So thank you very much, right? To BenQ has been a huge support. Calibrate has been, you know, it's powered by X-Ray, right? So I've worked with them for a very, very long time. Hanamule, I've worked with them for a while. So thank you very much for supporting it, because what they're going to do is we're going to take a series of pictures. I want you to email me, right? You can, my email's easy. It's rc@aboutrc.com. Send me whatever pictures you're working on. Show me something that you're going to like. I'm a big fan of printing. And I think that there's something to be said about actually getting a print that's actually printed on nice paper, and you open it up and you're like, this looks cool. So what I wanted to do, I was like, oh, you know, like I got a bunch of paper, I got some ink, you know, let's go ahead and print it. So I'm going to print a whole bunch of stuff. We'll take, you know, a couple of you, we'll take 25 or something like that. and I'll make a print of your image. We'll work on it, we'll tune it, we'll get it the way that we want it. I'm going to print it and send it to you, which I think is pretty cool. I was like, that'll be nice. And then Calibre turned around and said, well, what if we pick a couple of the pictures as well, and we send people some prizes? I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's nice of you. And then BenQ turned around and said, all right, then what we can do is we can just take like the best one, maybe not the best one, but just one of those that fits all of these different criterias. And what they were going to do is they were going to say, all right, this is their 32-inch monitor, which is fantastic. This is their brand new 27-inch monitor, which is fantastic. BenQ is going to give away one of these guys to one of you. So I wanted to make sure that I could show them, because I'm like, you should come to the other seminars, come to the other office hours, make sure that you have your email in and register. There's going to be a whole bunch of stuff that's going to be given out. But at the bare minimum, one of the things that I want you to have is a print of your own. So we'll pick them to the best of my ability, right? It's one-man shop here, except my wife and the dog. We'll go ahead and we'll print it and we'll get it over to you. I want you to be able to experience what it actually feels like to get something that's colored right, calibrated right, edited right, and sits in your hand. So that's pretty much it. Let's see here. Let's see, 27-inch BenQ 271 is connected with USB-C cord. I tend to connect all of my stuff with the USB-C cord. So I can do some testing on USB-C versus HDMI. I was liking the USB-C because of the HDR. So that I think is cool. Let's see. What if you have two different computers, a desktop and a travel laptop, and you want to preserve your catalog across two computers? How would you manage that? That's hard. That's actually hard, because you would have to have your catalog on a removable drive and then point those locations across. Like, you'd have to have your images on a removable drive, and then you have to have your catalog on a removable drive. And what I would better think would be good here would be for you to have a home-based catalog and then a separate catalog that you use when you're on the road, and then you're ingesting or importing into a home-based catalog. That's probably the one biggest pitfall of Lightroom, is that you don't have the ability to be able to hit multiple catalogs at this, multiple computers can hit one catalog at a time. And I think that that's kind of what they're trying to solve with Lightroom, right? The cloud version of Lightroom, because if everything's in the cloud, then you can hit it from all sorts of spots. The downside to that is that then all of your images are in the cloud, and that causes a bit of a problem. So, but we can go back and forth. Again, email me within that. Let's see here. Would love to see some adjustments of the soft image and stacks. Simone, I'm going to work on both, and upsizing. So Simone, I'm going to work on upsizing and sharpening those pictures-ish, right, in the next session on Tuesday. So make sure that you come to that. Remind me, if you have a specific thing that you want to work on, just send it to me, rc@aboutrc.com. If you want me to just do it live and start working on it, I'd be more than happy to take a look at those pictures. So we'll go ahead and we'll do that. Let's see here. James, so can I talk about stacks? Some edits I want to do in Photoshop. So Command E to start Photoshop. After I'm done and close it, the image is saved in Lightroom, stacked into the original. Sometimes I can't find any stacked images. I got to be honest with you, I do not like stacks, right? I find stacks to be very confusing to work with. So I don't like that as an option. Now, what are we talking about here? Let me just show this here. So if you go inside of Photoshop, there is an option where it winds up re-importing in this. Oh, yeah, you don't need to see that. No. There is an option where it winds up re-importing it as a stack. I usually turn most of my stacks off. Don't like it. I almost broke an NDA. I went crazy. So let's see. So what format should we do the editing on the photo that you submit? And that's Ken Stickrod. I would submit a Photoshop file. I think a Photoshop file would be fine. Probably what I would do is I would just right click on the Photoshop file and compress it, make it into a zip, and then send it that way, right? Or you could send me a link to, a Dropbox link or a Google Drive link for the image. But if you want me to take a look at it, I'd send a high-res image, like send the Photoshop image so that I could take a look at it, unless you want me to develop a picture for you, right? If you want me to develop a picture and work on a picture, then send the raw file and then I can take a look at that. So if you want to keep the settings inside of it, right? If you want to do a raw file with some of the settings that you did, let me show you how to do that because that's kind of cool. Right from inside of here, what I would do is I get to see my mom tomorrow. So I'm pretty excited. She's coming to visit. She makes tamales. And I think she's going to bring tamales. So I think it'll be awesome. So inside of here, if I were to take a look at this picture, right, this is a net file. So that's a raw file. But that raw file has a series of, yeah, it's fine. The raw file inside of there has a series of developed things, right? So I'm gonna show you two things here, right? Let's just say that I decide to export. That's not what I'm trying to do. Let's say that I want to try to export this image. And when I export this image, I would export this to the desktop. And let's just say that I'm not going to rename the picture, right? And then I save it as an original. When you export that out, what that's going to do is it's going to take, oh, actually, no, that's a TIFF image. Here, let's export this one out. That'll take a TIFF. But because that one's a raw file, it takes the raw image, right? So that's the raw file, and then it takes XMP data. That's all of the developed stuff, right? So that means that in order for me to be able to see all of this, I would have to take these two files and I'll do this. I'd have to take these two files and then zip those up, right? I would probably just make a new folder and then just call it let's call it Ken underscore stickrod. And then I would grab these two pictures, drag them in there. Then once you have that, right click and compress, and that turns it into a zip file for that folder, right? Who would have thought you were going to be getting IT classes at the same time? But that would be one way to do it. Or what you could do inside of here is you could grab this photo and we can work on that. Let's see, how do I want to do this? I'm going to go over here. I'm going to right click on this photo. And what I want to do is I want to be able to take that photo and convert. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm losing myself here. I want to be able to take that photo and I'm going to go to library, and under the library, I can convert that photo into a Dng file. Right? If I convert that, it's going to convert the raw file. It's going to give me a Dng. I click OK. Now that file is not a net file. It's actually a Dng file. So if I were to export that one out, like so, that's going to give me one singular Dng file. And the difference between that is that now you don't have those two files. You don't have the raw file and the XMP file. You have one Dng. Zip that up, send that over, and that should be fine. So, wow, I went 15 minutes over. Sorry, guys. Thank you so much for coming by. Thank you so much for stopping by the office hours. Hopefully, you've gotten something out of this, right? On Tuesday, we'll go ahead and we'll hold our next class. We'll talk a little bit about things that you should keep in mind inside of Photoshop when it comes to selections and how to be able to use smart selections. There's a lot of stuff that's happened inside of AI for Photoshop that I think that you should know. So it's a good idea for you to stop by, right? Oh, is it possible to calibrate an iMac and a BenQ to show the same colors, right? I wonder if I can get an iMac set up here. Jay, come to the session where we do the calibration for that, and I'm going to try to see if I could set something up where we can actually see something. Right? Good way to be able to test it. So you should be able to, right? If both of them should be calibrated, you should be able to. I mean, that's kind of the premise of calibration, right? You're just trying to get the images so that they match across different devices. So it'll be a good test, and we'll put the calibrator to the test. So thank you so much for stopping by, all of you. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you're getting something for this summer, and come by to the next class. I think it's going to be great. So I'll talk to you soon. Bye.